an emo cringe. I'm a cringe. I'm a cringe. No, I am actually going to talk about something that I made a blog post about really recently because I'm going to make this account emo finally, this YouTube channel. It's called My Emo Religion, but it's not really been about emo stuff like ever on the channel before, so let's go into it. Like, this is My Chemical Romance quote, you can't really see, but it says, "You're not in this alone." It's the first line of the first song ever written by My Chemical Romance. This actually is not about something that is great about the emo community, and it's a little bit smaller, and it's not necessarily a very prevalent thing in the My Chemical Romance fandom necessarily, but it's more prevalent in other sides of the emo community, like more prevalent in like Bring Me the Horizon fandoms. I've seen it a lot in there. I've seen it a lot in like more heavy kind of music, like Bad Omens and that stuff. And I've seen it a lot in like the more like Hollywood Undead kind of music. Like, I'm not saying there's anything specifically wrong with Hollywood Undead, but they have a very specific song that I very strongly associate with this side of emo, which is the song Bullet, Bullet, I think it's called Bullet. I strongly associate this specific song with the more dark side or the more toxic side of emo, because to me it sounds like they are glorifying mental health issues and depression and suicide very strongly. It's like this happy bouncy song about my legs are dangling off the edge. It just sounds, there's nothing, to me, it doesn't sound like you're supposed to be helped by the song. It's just something quirky and edgy and made for shock value. And personally, I feel that way about most of Hollywood Undead's music, but I could be wrong there, of course. If you're helped by them, no way, shape or form trying to shit on that. Personally, I have never been helped by them, so that's just a little PSA out there. But I'm talking about the more dark side, the more toxic side of emo, which definitely exists. Like, I hate how most emo people really strongly want to bring back the point that everything in emo is made to help people, which it is. The creators of most emo songs are definitely trying to help people. I'm not trying to make the argument that they're not, because they are, especially the older stuff. My Chemical Romance back in the day, like Revenge Tour, everything about the Revenge era was meant to help people, obviously. But there's a lot about emo culture and some emo fandoms that do have that toxic mindset, that very toxic way of dealing with their mental health issues, but which can kind of be dangerous, especially when they meet together. Because people that don't want to get better or have this weird notion of how to deal with your mental health problems can really, really damage people. And I've read a very, very, very triggering like article about it, which was like it was kind of a weird study because they had like interviewed like 8 people, which to me doesn't sound like a lot of people, but they made a statement about how they thought that this emo culture, or this, I don't know if they were talking about a specific emo culture or whatever, but they were talking about emo culture being pretty shitty to people with mental health problems, because it can kind of shift people's attitudes towards suicide and self-harm and stuff, in the sense that it can make people think it's more normal than it is. Like, yeah, it normalizes in the sense that it's not this terrible, I mean, it's terrible when people kill themselves, but a lot of people see mental illness especially as this terrifying thing. And yeah, self-harm and suicide are terrifying, and I don't think that we should ever try to normalize committing suicide or anything like we should normalize mental health and mental illness. We should normalize self-harm in the sense that we shouldn't normalize self-harm, right? We should normalize feeling those tendencies, and because a lot of people feel them, and I feel like we should normalize that people have these feelings, but I don't think we should normalize suicide, obviously. And what this article basically says is that a lot of these emo cultures or emo subgroups or whatever normalize using suicide or self-harm as coping mechanisms or ways of fleeing your situation, which first of all is absolutely against everything most emo bands have ever stood for, especially My Chemical Romance, which is the one I know most about. But Fall Out Boy doesn't like suicide, obviously. My Chemical Romance, like I said, very strong stance against it. 21 Pilots, always been, pretty upfront about not liking people to glorify their, losses, like Neon Gravestones, for example. Very, very clear what they mean. A lot of people still take a lot of emo lyrics out of context and use it to justify their own self-hatred or their self-destruction, which you might not believe, like as an emo person, you might not believe that this exists, and I understand it because you don't want your subculture that's already strongly associated with this to be even more associated with these things, but I don't think it's honest or fair to say that it doesn't exist, because it really does. Like, I feel like a lot of people go under the guise of emo without actually being emo. They're just very depressed and glorify their own depression, which is not what emo is about at all. And a lot of people think that that is the majority of emo, and there are people like that. It's just by no means the majority of them, and I feel like by not talking about it, a lot of people assume that we're scared of it or something. I don't know. And I feel like My Chemical Romance is not necessarily associated with it that much anymore, but the grander scheme of emo definitely still is. And when I was pretty deep into most, teenage cultures back in 2018, I was thrown into a group chat that was very much like the toxic side of emo, where people would share very graphic pictures of their scars and everything like that, having very, very graphic things, having like very glorifying kind of pictures, with the quotes and the knives and like the self-harm things. And it was a very, very toxic, terrible place to be, because as a person that was already struggling with these things, obviously these things got worse and worse. And I think that when you put people together that are very sick mentally, and they're not in the mindset to get better, things will get worse, because that's just how people work in that mindset. So I think that is not something we can deny, and it's really hard for me to see it, because you see people use My Chemical Romance lyrics to justify this type of behavior, which is something that none of the people in the band would ever stand for. If you would ask Gerard Way, even back in Bullets times, what do you think of people cutting themselves, to fit in or whatever, he would think it was absolute bullshit. He would not stand for, justifying your own, self-destruction. Obviously, it's not like, oh, ew, how dare you cut yourself or anything like that. He said in one interview that it really broke his heart, even the thought of people thinking that they had to do something in order to fit in, and just knowing that he would never ever approve of people using his lyrics to justify their very shitty behavior to themselves, but also to other people, because again, posting your pictures of your scars does not only show how much you are, proud, or how you're invested in your destruction. It also shows that you don't care about triggering other people. If your entire account is dedicated to triggering people use those music genres to justify those things, and I don't think any of the band members would ever approve of that. So it's just very, very disheartening for me to just know that it exists. Seeing an article like that being published, knowing that there is a part of it that is true, it's a minority, obviously, so I don't think they did a very good job about, actually investigating how big of a group this was. It's a minority of emo kids, obviously. But I am sad to know that there are people that see this very shitty part of emo and think that this is what every emo thing is, and it isn't. So if you're ever stuck on that side of emo, know that you don't have to lose your emo-ness, you don't have to leave your emo communities, because there are people like me, people that are you know, into the punk scene, into emo scenes, and you know, they want to, they're not like, it's not like I don't understand what you're going through, it's just that my approach and a lot of other people's approaches to mental illness is a lot healthier than sharing my own stuff that directly. You know, I know how to do boundaries, and like a lot of other people do know how to do boundaries, and I think it's important to find them less toxic communities where you can talk openly and freely about your mental health problems without actually triggering a lot of people, without being triggered constantly yourself. And I think that's why it's important for people to know that if you see an article like this, like one I saw, which I'm not going to link below. I mean, I am, just because I want y'all to know that I'm not talking out of my ass, but don't check it out if you're, you know, sensitive at all to this stuff, because there's a lot of graphic stuff in there. Just know that if you find anything like that down, that I'm going to link down below, that that's not a representation of most of the emo scene. I just want you to know that if you ever feel like your emo friends are not the right type of emo, know that there's people out there that think about things differently and you know, are more supportive in a sense. So, you know, just that emo is kind of dope. It's not all death and sadness, you know. There's definitely people out there like that, but it's not all that. So this is it. This is the video. Comment, like, and subscribe. I'm so bad at this, but just do the things. And see you guys later, I guess.